What if the most capable women you know are secretly wondering if they belong? Hello, and welcome to the Imposter Roster. I'm your host, Christine Chupenko, and I'm excited for today's show. Today's guest didn't just study the stars, she went rogue with them. Robbie Hunt is a self-described experienced contrarian on a mission to combat junk astrology and astrological ignorance. She's a metaphysical Christian minister, a teacher of earth-centered wisdom, and a born and bred country girl raised on stock car racing and respecting her elders. Robbie uses history, psychology, world religions, and just plain old common sense to read your birth chart, not as a map, but as the spark for your personal revolution. She's also a badass Aquarian who gets her kicks cooking spicy Indian food while listening to the hits of Arijit Singh. Fellow imposters and certified badasses, please welcome the founder of Rogue Astrology, Robbie Hunt. Robbie,
Hey.
welcome.
Thank you. And hey, you said Arijit Singh very well. Nice.
Well, I have had many years of software engineering, so guess with whom I've been working. I swear, honestly, after so many years of working in the software industry, I always swore that I could speak Hindi fluently, as well as Chinese. Neither is true, actually, but the pronunciation, I am very good at it. So Robbie, there are so many aspects to you becoming who you are, many turns in your career, many interesting and unique perspectives that you have got along the way. I'm going to guess in all the different things that you have done, there's more than just one area where you felt like, I'm not sure if I should be here. But have you, by any chance, been able to determine that one really important turning point in your life where you said, you know what? I'm just going to be me?
The first time someone called me Reverend Robbie.
Did that feel like, wait, you looked both ways and said, oh, you mean me?
No, the very first time that someone addressed me as Reverend Robbie before I'd even thought about something called seminary. I was doing some part-time work at a metaphysical bookstore, and there was an incident in which I said to someone, look, that person's on the phone. You need to talk to them. They need you now. You don't get to, I think I said something about, you don't get to just sit there. They need you now. And that person looked up at me and went, oh, well, Reverend Robbie. And I had to sit with that for days because the idea of being ordained had never come to my mind. And that was a moment in which I recognized that someone saw something in me that I actually knew had been there all along, but I didn't really have the vocabulary for. And it was finally a culmination of a whole lot of things in my life, but it was that right there.
Was seminary even on your radar at that time?
Being ordained wasn't even on my radar. There's people who get ordained just so that they can do weddings and things.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never thought about any of that kind of stuff. Never. I always enjoyed going to church and that kind of thing, but I never thought about that. And boom, and there we go. I mean, that day rocked my world. And, as an astrologer, I wish that I'd written that date down. But even that time, I was still kind of just a hobbyist with astrology. And who knows what was going on in the stars on that day, but it changed everything.
You were interested in astrology at that very same time, but if there's something that resonated with you, that means somewhere deep inside, prior to that moment, it had to have been a thought, right? Some ministerial type path?
Well, I think I've always been one who has wanted to be in service. And I was doing that through my writing skills or through my creative copywriting and graphic design skills. I've always wanted to be more than just a vendor to my clients. I've wanted to be more than just an employee when I was employed. And so I think that it's just part of just the natural progression of finally getting to the point where you realize that you have your own form of service. And There's a reason we call it light working. It's to bring light into whatever work it is that you were doing. And I think I was doing that. And now it was just to put it onto a different stage. I have always loved the teachings of Jesus. What I haven't liked was the Christian church.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it just was a way for me to finally move into those teachings in a way that would give me voice and a vocabulary and a way to relate to it.
You said that you were also very interested in astrology. At what point in your life did you start down the astrology path?
I think like a lot of people when I was a teenager and read some horoscope in the paper or something like that. So I can remember in high school talking about, I'm an Aquarian, and what does that mean? I didn't really start any kind of a big study in it until 2006. And then I really bumped it up in 2007. And I've been studying it ever since. And then it became much more of a profession for me in 2012.
So where were you in your astrology career, let's just call it that, when the Reverend Robbie incident occurred?
It was before the astrology stuff. The Reverend Robbie incident occurred in 2005. I started 2006 studying astrology, 2007 really kicking it up, 2012 when I put my first stuff out on Facebook. So it was before that, which is why I've always brought those metaphysical Christian teachings into the astrology readings that I do.
It seems to me, because I was raised in a fairly religious household, and it's weird because at the same time, I was exposed to astrology, not because there was any practicing astrologer in the family, but one thing I know is those two things don't normally belong in the same room. So were there any conflicts for you as you were saying, I really love Jesus and his teachings, and I really want to know more about being an Aquarian? How did you say, all right, both are okay?
Not easily, I will say that. My view is that the Bible is a book of mysticism, that the Bible is a book that talks about divination and astrology and connection with God, and that you and God are one. But that a large majority of the Bible is also incomplete, fabricated, plain out false, and not relevant to where we are now. And that is very much a controversial point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But I never felt that the Bible was 100% correct. So I do remember at about 8 or 9 years old, sitting in church and whispering to my mother, I don't think they have this right. And my mother going, shh, like that. And I think the time when I finally was able to resolve the two, I couldn't tell you exactly the date, but it's somewhere around 1983 or 84. My mother went to a yard sale and found this little book. Something told her to buy it. She did, and she gave it to me. Little bitty book. And it was called The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovel Shinn. And she referred to herself as a Christian metaphysician. And that was the book that gave me the language. Up to that point, I didn't know how to communicate what it was that I was feeling. I just knew that something didn't feel totally as it was being presented to me. But even after that, when you go that rogue with something like religion, where they threaten you with your mortal soul,
Mm-hmm.
and how do we know for sure? How do we know for sure? And they threaten you with that. Most people are going to take the path of least resistance with that. And I think finally getting to the Reverend Robbie point was the point where I couldn't. And the focus of what all of these podcasts are about, the imposter syndrome, was what I dealt with in between, because there was a whole lot of, well, maybe I'm just wanting the Bible to say what I think I want it to say. Maybe I'm just being contrary. Maybe I'm being a whole lot of things. And it was not until the Reverend Robbie incident that I realized, no, I actually had this all along. And now it had finally given me some guidance. It didn't point me towards seminary at that moment, but it gave me a different identity. But in between was the imposter syndrome.
Finding that book, it also was a semi-validation of what you were feeling. But as you said, you didn't have the words to merge the two.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little more about the imposter syndrome, like how it affected you? Because yours is a little different. It's like you knew you were in the right place, but something wasn't fitting. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think I knew that my feelings were genuine. Let's put it that way. I knew that how I felt was genuine. I didn't know why. And so when I said to my mother, hey, I don't think they have this right, I meant that, and I knew it. I knew I felt that way. Where the imposter syndrome came up for me was the audacity to take on something that big. Who in the hell do you think you are? And part of why I put on my biography that I came from a country girl out in the middle of nowhere, raised around stock car racing, and that if I didn't say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, I was going to get a spanking. And I was raised with this phrase from my mother, don't get above your raising. Don't get above your raising. So who am I to tell all of Christendom, I think that you have it wrong? And it's got to be the way that the first person who thought that, I don't think that Earth is flat, and I don't think that the Earth is in the center of the solar system, that it's the sun. When you're taking on something big like that, you do go through the, who the hell do you think you are? And even to the point of, was there something wrong with my mental faculties? I can remember in the late 90s thinking that maybe I should take an IQ test. Maybe I should do that Myers-Briggs thing, that there was something that was not right with me because I wasn't seeing things that to everyone else was obvious. Jesus died for your sins. That's obvious. Why are you arguing about this?
I have to tell you, I literally felt a wave just wash right through me when you used the words, who the hell do you think you are? I really believe many of the listeners have felt that very same thing with, different conditions causing that. But that is really powerful because I would have to say that's one of those signals where you could very potentially just step back and say, yeah, who do I think I am? And recede right back into the background because of how we're raised. I was not raised in the South. I'm a good old Ukrainian girl in the North. But very, very similar stories that you don't question the Bible, because if you do, you're questioning God. But still, your little soul is saying, this doesn't feel right. And the fact that you felt, I guess, that feeling on those words, because we've all heard it, who the heck do you think you are? Who cares what you think, right?
Mm-hmm. It was double so because I was raised in the Southern Baptist Church, and still today, the Baptist Church is one of the holdovers of women don't teach men, women are not ordained, wives submit to your husbands, hey, if you want to know more about the Bible, ask your husband, et cetera, et cetera. So I was raised in that. And so it was a double, who the hell do you think you are?
Does that still hold true? You're still living in the South, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm outside of Atlanta, yeah.
And does that still hold true for where you are?
Oh, sure. I mean, here in Atlanta, we've got all diverse form of religions, Christian and non-Christian. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to go into the women can be ordained, you need to look more Methodist, Episcopalian, Lutheran. You're not going to find that in the more evangelical, which would include Baptist, the more fundamentalist. You're not going to find that. No. Even among the Episcopalians, Lutherans, Methodists, the more evangelical, no, that's not going to happen.
No, that's absolutely true. now let's talk about the astrological part. So not only do you jump that hurdle and say, nope, I got to be me. We're going to get ordained. That's what we're going to do.
Mhm.
Now you're looking at the astrology. So have you had any pushback or have you met with any difficulties because you are both? Like, does one outweigh the other with respect to how people view you? For instance, if you're an astrologer, then you can't be that effective as a minister. Or, well, if you're a minister, what the heck do you know about astrology? Have you faced any of that?
I have, but it's this connecting word called Christian. Because there are plenty of people who are in astrology who are quote unquote spiritual, but their problems with the Christian church are big. There are people who are Christian who can handle spiritual, but astrology, they were taught, no, that's divination, throw the witches in the fire, that kind of thing. So it's the Christian part of that that's the problem. And I'm the one who, in the back of my mind, is understanding, yeah, but I'm talking about the original teachings of Jesus. I'm not talking about this other stuff. But that's not how 90% of the Christian world is going to see it. So it's that word that causes the problem between the two.
All right, you've just sparked a very interesting question in my head, and that is, you said the original teachings of Jesus. Now, you know that the usual response to that is, yeah, the Bible. So what's your version of, and your version is probably the original teachings of Jesus, but where are you finding error? Like, how is that what's supplying you with your knowledge?
Well, let's be intellectually honest. Do we know what those are with 100% certainty? No, we don't.
No.
We don't have video. We don't have any original text. So much of that original text was written so long after the entire crucifixion event. What we does have reason to be skeptical. And if you even want to get down to it further, what is written in those original Gospels is very different than the letters that Paul wrote, the books that Paul wrote, or that are attributed to Paul. There is inconsistencies among many of the books in both the Old and the New Testament. And there's all kinds of ways to explain all kinds of things, like statistics. You can find a statistic to prove what you want. So you can find a Christian apologist who can explain very deftly why the Bible is the inerrant word of God. But then you're going to find the people who are looking for that word of God, and they are able to point out the inconsistencies, not because they're trying to disprove the Bible, they're trying to prove it because they want something physical in their hands because God is a non-physical. And so it really is what's your objective, in terms of how you're talking about the Bible. I would say that any enlightened being who has ever walked on this earth probably taught the same thing, because that doesn't change. Human experience with it changes, but that doesn't change. And I have to think that it went to basically one concept, and that is, when you don't know what to do, be in love.
I am in agreement with you. That's actually a common theme I'm hearing from various, we'll say, religious authorities, because things are changing. You, as an astrologer, know there's a lot of changes afoot. And there's a lot more enlightenment coming to light. You know, you're hearing more and more. In fact, there are things that I've been hearing and seeing that I just would say, I never thought I'd see the day. And we are seeing the day, which now brings me to, what is it that makes you a rogue astrologer?
Oh my goodness, we don't have that much time, but I'll give you a few. There was a period of time in which astronomers and astrologers were the same people. One of the things that perplexed them the most was when they would look through their telescopes and see that the planet was going backwards. And they couldn't figure out the physics of that. And for centuries, how does that happen? And so it was because it was such a phenomenal event to think about a planet going forward, stopping, and then deciding to go backwards. They viewed that as some kind of doom that was coming from the gods, and they would advise people accordingly. But then you get Kepler, Galileo, and a couple of other people together within about a 100-year period, and they started to figure out what that was, that it was an optical illusion, that because of where the Earth was placed in its relation to the sun and its wobble on its axis, and the same thing with that planet. Where was it in relation to the sun, its wobble on its axis, and then us looking at each other with the sun in between. And now it can very easily be explained with even things that we encounter here on Earth. The astronomy folks said, okay, well, this is a natural occurrence. Why are we saying it's such doom and gloom? But the astrologer part, the people who were more astrologer than they were astronomer, was like, well, now, wait a minute, hold on. How do we present this as a good thing? Because we get more clients.
Oh.
Now, that's a modern day interpretation. It was that we have more control. We have more reason to influence people with their decisions if they keep thinking that this is going on. I found out about that when I realized what a retrograde was, that literally a planet's not going backwards. So what is really going on? And I started with the most popular one of all, a Mercury retrograde.
Which we're now in.
Which we're now in as we
Yes.
record. So the whole idea of, okay, your airline is going to be late, all your texts are going to go wrong, everything is wrong, boom, 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 boom. But it was not until I studied metaphysics that I understood why. I started kind of understanding psychology. Why does everything go to hell in a handbasket during a Mercury retrograde? And that is because it is a group illusion that we pay attention to. We give into it. I don't have any trouble during a Mercury retrograde that I don't have any other time of the year. And that is what made me say, if that's not the case, what else is wrong?
Oh my gosh, you could knock me over with a feather right now. That has got to be by far the best description of a Mercury retrograde and the why that I've ever heard.
And here's the thing, Mercury gets all the press. I tell people Mercury just has a better press agent than Saturn and Jupiter and Mars. Now, Mercury goes retrograde 3 or 4 times a year, so we get to talk about it more. The other planets only once a year. But you don't see Cosmopolitan magazine writing an article about how to handle the upcoming Saturn retrograde.
No, that's true, because everyone would say, well, so what? Because it wasn't brought to their attention and it wasn't made the bad thing. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And they're not taught how to get on the bandwagon with it. But if someone like the old-time propagandist Edward Bernays, he's the guy who wrote literally the book about propaganda and how to do it. If the astrology community could figure out propaganda, they could get people as upset about a Saturn retrograde as they do a Mercury one.
Oh my gosh. Honest to goodness, that's really something to chew on, really. So I have a question then. In your life as an astrologer, had you incurred any imposter syndrome feelings?
Well, it's almost like going against the whole Christian nation with the Bible. Go to Amazon and just put in astrology books. How many thousands are you going to find? And they all say the same thing. But does anybody ever really sit and prove the theory? Well, people would say, but Robbie, my computer goes wrong every time I go through a Mercury retrograde. And I have to say that's because you're expecting it.
100%. 100%. Robbie, we got to get you out there in front of everybody right now because I am telling you. Now, you even have heard me say it's because it's Mercury retrograde. I know better because I follow you, Robbie. I do. So I am wiser. But when something not so fun happens, you can't help but wanting to blame someone or something, right?
Well, let's also complete the loop on it real quick, though. So what do you do when a planet is in retrograde? To me, that is God Universe's period of time for you to address the quote-unquote illusion of whatever that planet's about in your own life. And some of our illusions are so deeply ingrained in us, you can't pull them out that quickly. We don't have the psychological tools for how to do it, so we shave them off gradually. And our mind is one of the places that holds the most illusion about things. And so that's why Mercury goes retrograde as much as it does. Plus, it's the closest planet to the sun. So when I am doing readings, when I'm doing interps, I just keep focusing on it's an illusion. So it's a time to deal with the illusions of Mercury or Saturn and task management, of Mars and the action you take. Just go on down the line with the planet. So complete the loop there. Well, then what do you do during a retrograde? That's what you do.
Go within. I believe I've heard you say that before, and you are so right. You know, hearing your story, Robbie, I think it is safe to say that you have risen above imposter syndrome on several counts. And in your case, it is more about you knowing you belong, but then figuring out how do you tell the rest of the world, how do you belong? But in doing that, you do experience the imposter syndrome. So the fact that you have shown that you've risen above it, especially because you've created your new brand, which is Rogue Astrology. Love it.
Thank you.
I have to say, you know what that means? This is where we raise a glass and tell you, Robbie, that you have stepped off the imposter roster and into your very own spotlight. Yay.
Yay. At 63 years old, I finally got there.
But there's the thing. You got there. I'm so happy about that. So for those of you listening who want to know more about Robbie, and believe me, you want to know more about Robbie, you can find her on rogueastrology.com. And she delivers astrology in a very, very real way. And you know, if you don't believe in astrology, and I'm not saying that you have to, but if you question, just say, but you know, isn't this against God? This is the best person. This is the best person to have as your mentor, just giving you information, not to convince you of anything, just to give you information so you can determine what your heart and spirit say and what resonates with you. So take a little look at rogueastrology.com and do yourself a favor and make a little connection. You won't be sorry. So thank you very much, Robbie Hunt, for joining me on this episode. I could honestly talk to you for hours. And in my head, I'm thinking, we're going to have her on again because I've got more questions. But
I would love to do it.
You know, I'm a Gemini. I got lots of questions. So thank you again, and hope to see you soon.
Oh, thank you so much, Christine. And I am enjoying watching your growth and your movement out of the imposter syndrome, too.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a wonderful day.